Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty, and in today's episode we are going to be using sequins in 10 creative ways. Now most people know about using sequins just sprinkled as an add-on, but here's a little peek at where I'm going, using sequins in uniquely artful ways. Here's a general overview of supplies that I'm going to be using for these various ways. I've got liquid glue, I've got, of course, a pot of sequins. What's important about those sequins is that there's multicolors, also multi-sizes. And then a pair of tiny tweezers is going to be super helpful. And then other supplies that go along with each technique. Now, most of my examples, I'm going to be working on pocket-style cards or journaling-style cards, but feel free to take these ideas and scale them to whatever size scrapbooking you like best. Let's go ahead and start with borders. This is probably, besides sprinkling on your layout, this is probably the easiest technique. I like to use strong tape for this, either a paper tearaway tape or this red line tape. That strong adhesive really is easy to work with, but you could also use liquid glue. And then I just sprinkle on the sequins and press them in. And this gives kind of rough lines, but if you imagine this line across, say, a 12 by 12 page, you'll still get that sense of a straight line without it being rigid and formally straight. So this can give you a more playful bit of a straight line. And here is a close-up of that one, and you can see how fun they are with all of these various sequins overlapping. And next up we have drawing shapes with liquid glue, and you could draw any shape you want, maybe a simple flower, maybe a bumblebee. And then I just lay one sequin at a time onto the glue, and depending on your glue, you might need to work in sections. My glue, and I will have links for you for everything, is fairly quick drying, and I barely made it around this heart before it started setting up on me. So just keep that in mind with your liquid glue. And to finish up this card, I stamped a simple sentiment in the center of one of my shapes. Next up, we're going to be talking about rainbows, and since we were just gluing shapes, why not glue a rainbow? Rainbows are really hot and popular items right now, and you can make your own fun and fancy rainbows with sequins. Now, one thing about rainbows is that as you work towards the middle of your rainbow, your lines are going to get smaller, and you're going to need fewer sequins for the inner layers. And also I like to use the smaller sequins for this as well, and that's why having a pot of mixed shapes and sizes of sequins is really helpful. And just look at that shine. And here is the finished journaling card. Moving on, one of the ways that is pretty popular is to fill in the blanks, I like to call it, and that is matching up the colors of the sequins with the colors on your pattern paper. And here I am doing it in a few different ways. I've got a glue and spill section of pink. I've done a row of green just along the border edge. For this blue, I'm doing a bit of an ombre effect. So I'm starting with a darker blue and then working my way and kind of fading the sequins out in an ombre effect. Here with the black, I'm doing more of an organized pattern, and I am doing offset polka dots, and I'm using those floral shaped sequins. So that's really fun. And then on this kind of creamy section, I am doing a pattern of large, small of the same color of sequins. So feel free to mix up your patterns. Speaking of patterns, let's take a sheet of pattern paper and simply spice it up a little bit. And here is a simple geometric, and it's really easy to just add sequins to those intersections of geometrics. And you can do the whole thing or just a section of things. Here is where I took a more complex pattern and I zhuzhed it up by adding a variety of sequins around this shape. Next up, we're going to be talking about flowers. Now, this isn't a stamping video, but I did stamp and die cut my own flowers. But you could feel free to use, pre-made ephemera embellishments to do this with, or go ahead and stamp them if you like. And once I've got my flowers ready to go, I'm going to create centers in my flowers with these sequins, and I just add a dot of glue into the center and put one sequin in the center. And then I'm going to spice it up more by adding a line of glue around that sequin and then tucking in smaller sequins to give it more of a structure and focal point. And if you stick around for the close-up, you'll see a little bit better what I mean. And then once I put these flowers onto my journaling card, I can add more spice to this by creating some vines and leaves to go along with it. And again, that's a great reason to have different sizes of sequins in a sequin mix. So as you can see, this adds a lot of depth and texture to the flowers, and I think it is a pretty touch to a project. So let's go ahead and talk about shakers. This is certainly a very popular way to use sequins. However, it kind of stresses some people out, and I want to show you a really simple way to do a shaker. I'm using 2 journaling cards just because this is going to be an independent piece that you can add to a greeting card or to a scrapbook layout. I die cut a window into one of them. You could also use a punch. And then I'm going to use a stamp that coordinates with my die to stamp a background through the top layer with the die cut shape onto the back layer. And this is going to add some texture to behind the sequins. And then the secret to this is to use a Ziploc bag. Now I save Ziploc baggies from, other embellishments and things I get in kits and such. And then I'm just going to glue it to the back of my die cut window. And at first I had too many sequins in there, so find the right level of sequins for you. And then I just sandwich these 2 pieces together with some more adhesive, and I'm just using my tape runner adhesive. But you could use a stronger tape if you're worried about it, or whatever strong adhesive that you feel comfortable with. And then that's it. It's super easy. Now I finished decorating this shaker after it was put together, and that's not a great idea because it's lumpy and bumpy and it caused my stamping to smudge. So I would highly recommend decorating it beforehand, but you can learn from my mistake. All right, let's talk about punches. You can take a punch shape and spread a nice gooey layer of glue on there, and then just sprinkle your sequins onto that glue and then press it down a little bit. And I like to actually press it down with a little bit of a flat heavy item like a stamp block, and then I just leave it to dry like that, and that helps all the sequins adhere. Now here's one that I already had done and dried. Now some of the sequins will not stick and you'll be loose, so you'll have to, kind of shake those off and get them out of the way. And then these are going to overhang the edges, obviously, and I just take a good pair of kind of strong multi-purpose scissors. Don't use your good paper scissors for this. And then I just trim off the edges right around that punch shape. And if you do it from the back side, you'll be able to see the punch shaped versus the front side of just all the sequins. So once you have those trimmed off, then you will find that you have a very pretty, sparkly, sequined shape. And if any of the little excess pieces near the edges do fall off, you can just add a touch more glue and tuck those back on. And here are a couple of views of some completed journaling cards with these shapes that I've actually popped up with some foam adhesive, so you can see how fun and how much texture and shine you can get from those shapes. Next up, we're going to do something really similar. We're going to die cut. So this technique was a little tricky, and it actually took me a bit of trial and error to figure it out. So do as I say and not as I do. So what I figured out in the end was that I will take the die that I want to use to die cut these sequin shapes, and I will draw a line up close around the edge of the die because the die cuts inside of its outer edge. If you draw straight around the middle, that'll give you plenty of room without wasting too many extra sequins and time. And then I've kind of already done one here because it wasn't the clearest example, so I kind of skipped through that. But for this butterfly, I'm going to go ahead and trace the outer edge of that pencil line, and then I want to make sure it's a nice wide line of glue, and I'm going to put one sequin at a time into that glue, and this is where a pair of tweezers come in handy. I tried using my little pickup tool, but because the glue is wet, it was coating the tip of my pickup tool, which wasn't working so well, but the tweezers worked a little bit better for this. Now to try and keep this random, I just tried to pick up each sequin on the edge of the pile as I saw it to keep kind of this random pattern going, but you could certainly, if you wanted it to be very specific, separate out your colors beforehand so that you have a pile ready to go and your glue won't dry up on you. And then once you have the outline of your shape done, what you're going to do is fill in the inside with a puddle of glue, and you want it to be fairly thick so that everything will stick. And then, so my mistake was just sprinkling all the sequins straight on top, and that actually, see, and there I go sprinkling. That actually made multiple layers of sequins, and then that was too thick for my die cut machine. So what I ended up doing on a final try was, again, more carefully putting sequins down and spreading them out with my tweezers so that there was just a single layer, and letting it dry that way. And again, I put this block on top of it, and I use it to press those sequins down really well into that glue. Some of the sequins will be loose after this process, so just tip it over, shake it so that any of the excess sequins fall off, and then you can save those for another time. And here is my recovered butterfly project. So I did this one after my other failures. The circle I got to cut fine, and the heart I got to cut fine because they did end up being thinner, and the die makes a difference too. Now if you have a thicker form of these thin dies, that'll help. And notice I did add a couple of layers of plain cardstock on top of my project before I ran it through the die cut machine. Now I didn't have to do that with the other two dies, but this butterfly one needed that extra thickness to get it to cut properly, so know that you might need a couple of those shims. Don't make your shims so thick that it's going to stick in your machine. If you can't turn that handle, don't force it, because I have killed die cut machines on accident trying to force it through. Now it might be a little tough to get it to pop loose once you do, but look at that butterfly. Oh my goodness, I was so thrilled when this worked. I did have a couple of bits here and there that weren't quite crisply cut, and let me say this now, that a simpler die is going to be better, and that's why I used a circle and a heart. This butterfly was the most complicated shape, and it was definitely harder to cut out. So keep simple in mind when you're doing these. And let's take a look at what they look like in the end. Now, because number 8 and 9 were very similar techniques, I do have number 10 for you, but there's a bonus number 11, so stick around to that. Now we're getting a little more complicated here with some stitching, and what I like to do is pre-punch my holes when I'm going to do some stitching. And for this, I punched at every 1/4 of an inch. Easy math to remember, doesn't have to be too hard. I did use a T-ruler to try and keep my line of punched holes straight. I am using a silver thread just because my sequins are sparkly, so I want my thread to be sparkly too, but you can use any thread you want. Now the first sequin in this step is a little trickier, so thread your sequin onto your string and then go back down through the exact same hole you came up through, and you'll have to kind of scoot your sequin around until it is laying right side up. And then go through the second hole, go up through your next sequin, make sure your sequins are right side up or the way you want them to face, and then go down back through that first sequin. And then you're going to go up through your third hole, put on your third sequin, and go back down through your second sequin. And I have to kind of squish my sequins so that they slightly overlap each other as I go, and I keep them overlapping all in the same direction. You can do it however you want. And then when I get to the end, I tape off the back, and look at these pretty, pretty rows of sequins. This just makes me so happy. And for this one, I turned it into an actual journaling card, but you could do this stitched row of sequins in shapes, as borders, as frames. Just let your imagination go with this technique. And for the final one, I would like you to use sequins as the focal point. So instead of it being a side attraction, let's make it the focal point. And I used this circle die to give myself a very straight circle, because trying to draw circles on my own is not happening. And then I'm going to use yellow sequins to go along this shape. And this is where having your sequins separated out ahead of time would be helpful, because you'll see later in the video that I run out of yellow sequins. And I am going to create for you a sunshine. And so I've got some rays coming off of this central circle, and I will just keep working on this shape, and you'll see where I went with it in the end. So here my sunshine is all done, and because I didn't have enough sequins, I filled in the rest of my shape with a nice big bold title. And this lets my photo really shine. Pun totally intended. I hope this gives you lots of ideas on how to use your sequins. They're an inexpensive product and we can do so many creative things with them. I've showed you some of my ideas and I would love to hear what your ideas are. So if you have a fun way that you enjoy using sequins, do let me know, let us know, so that we can read your comments and learn and share wonderful ideas together. I will be back on Friday with my free Cut File Friday video, so I do hope you'll join me for that. I'll see you next time.